Damian Weston had humiliated plenty of employees before, but this time the Mafia Boss chose the wrong woman. Hot coffee splashed across Ave Carter's janitor uniform. The room went silent. Vanessa Reed waited for the new cleaner to cry. Damian expected an apology. Instead, Ave slowly looked down at the coffee, staining her uniform, then raised her eyes to Damian. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten him. She simply asked, "Are you sure you want to treat me like this?" Damian almost laughed. As far as he was concerned, she was just another janitor. Ave picked up her cleaning supplies and walked away. But the moment she turned the corner, the expression on her face changed. Because Damian Weston had just made a mistake, and he had absolutely no idea who he'd made it with. Ave Carter walked into her father's company wearing a janitor's uniform. Her father, Richard Carter, was the wealthy CEO behind the business. But Avenue wasn't there to enjoy the privileges attached to his name. She wanted to understand what ordinary employees experienced when executives weren't watching. That meant nobody could know who she was. If employees recognized Richard Carter's daughter, they would behave differently. So Avenue entered the company as a cleaner. No special treatment, no executive privileges, just another employee expected to do her job. At first, being ignored worked in her favor. People passed Ave in the hallways without giving her a second glance. Then she met Miss Evelyn. The elderly cleaner was kind to Ave from the beginning. She treated the new janitor with respect and helped her adjust to the work. But Avenue soon noticed that not everyone treated Miss Evelyn with the same dignity, especially Damian Weston and Vanessa Reed. Damian was a mafia boss, and Vanessa worked in HR. Neither knew who Ave really was. To them, she was simply another cleaner. Their behavior toward her quickly became hostile. Ave endured verbal humiliation and disrespect while quietly observing how they treated other lower-level employees. What disturbed her wasn't only the cruelty. It was how comfortable they were doing it. They didn't appear worried about consequences. They behaved as though workers like Ave and Miss Evelyn had no power to challenge them. Then the mistreatment escalated. Hot coffee was thrown at Ave. For a moment, she stood completely still. The heat hurt, but the humiliation cut deeper. She looked at Damian. "Are you sure you want to treat me like this?" There was no fear in his reaction. He still saw a janitor standing in front of him. Nothing more. Ave could have ended everything right there. One revelation would have changed the entire room. But she didn't make it, because Avenue had already begun seeing something more important than how Damian treated her. Miss Evelyn lived with this reality. So did other employees who didn't have Ave's family name or protection. Ave wanted to know how deep the problem went, so she kept her identity hidden. As she spent more time with Miss Evelyn, Ave began understanding the experiences of workers who couldn't simply challenge people above them. They needed their jobs. They depended on their wages. And speaking against someone with authority could carry consequences they couldn't afford. For Avenue, the janitor position had started as a way to understand ordinary employees. Now it was showing her something her father's executive offices had failed to reveal. People inside his company were being mistreated, and Miss Evelyn's experience made Ave question whether the problem went beyond humiliation. Ave began paying closer attention. She listened, she watched, and she remembered what she saw. Damian and Vanessa still had no reason to be careful around her. That was exactly what Ave needed. If she revealed herself now, their behavior would change immediately. She would never know what else was happening when they believed nobody powerful was watching. So Avenue made her decision. She would remain undercover. The humiliation hadn't driven her away. It had given her a reason to stay. And as Ave returned to work in the same janitor's uniform Damian had treated with such contempt, one question stayed with her. What else was happening inside her father's company that people at the top couldn't see? Ave Carter remained undercover. Damian Weston and Vanessa Reed still saw nothing more than a janitor whenever they looked at her. That allowed Ave to keep watching. But as she spent more time working alongside Miss Evelyn, she began hearing complaints that had nothing to do with humiliation. Employees were losing money. Some received less pay than they expected. Others noticed deductions they couldn't explain. Ave started paying attention to the numbers. What she found wasn't an innocent payroll mistake. Money was being skimmed from workers' pay. Fake fees were being charged to employees who had little power to question them. Ave had entered the company to understand how ordinary workers were treated. Now she realized some of them were being financially exploited. Suspicion wasn't enough. She needed proof. Ave quietly began documenting what she found. She collected evidence of the payroll discrepancies and fraudulent fees, while also recording the abuse of authority taking place inside the company. Then another detail caught her attention: the security cameras. With cameras throughout the building, complaints about serious incidents should have been easy to verify. But some incidents weren't appearing where they should. Ave investigated further. The cameras had been tampered with. Someone wasn't only exploiting employees. Someone was making it harder for them to prove what had happened. Ave added the discovery to her evidence. The pattern was becoming impossible to dismiss. Payroll skimming, fake fees, security camera tampering, abuse of power. Miss Evelyn had spent years working honestly inside the company. Yet people like her were the ones suffering. Ave knew she couldn't expose everything too early. She continued gathering proof. But staying unnoticed was becoming difficult. Damian started watching her. At first, Ave noticed it in passing. Then his attention became harder to ignore. The Mafia Boss, who had once barely considered the janitor worth looking at, was suddenly interested in where she went and what she was doing. Vanessa became suspicious too. Ave understood what that meant. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't know how much she had discovered. Not yet. Ave continued working. Every day she remained undercover increased the risk, but also brought her closer to evidence that couldn't simply be denied. Then Damian's behavior changed. The mockery disappeared. So did the casual arrogance he usually showed around her. Now, there was something different in his eyes. Suspicion. Ave knew she was running out of time. She focused on securing the evidence she had gathered. Once everything was safe, she headed toward the stairwell. Ave stepped through the door. It closed behind her. She reached for the handle. It wouldn't open. Ave tried again. Nothing. Then she heard a voice behind her. Looking for something, Ave? She turned. Damian Weston was standing between her and the only other exit. For the first time since Ave had become a janitor, the Mafia Boss wasn't smiling. Ave stared at Damian across the stairwell. The Mafia Boss stood between her and the only other exit. Move. Damian didn't. You've been watching us. Ave held his stare. I've been paying attention. His expression hardened. He demanded to know what she had discovered and where she'd put the evidence. Ave refused to answer. Damian stepped closer. For weeks, he'd treated her like someone who could be humiliated and intimidated without consequences. Now he needed that same janitor to stay silent. Ave didn't move, and the stairwell door opened. Richard Carter stepped inside. Damian turned toward the CEO. Before he could explain, Richard's attention went straight to Ave. Are you all right? Damian frowned. Richard moved toward her. That was when Damian realized something was wrong. Mr. Carter, Richard cut him off. She's my daughter. Silence. Damian looked at Ave, then back at Richard. The woman he'd humiliated, the janitor he'd dismissed as insignificant, was Ave Carter, the CEO's daughter. For the first time, Damian had nothing to say. But Avenue hadn't stayed undercover just to see that expression on his face. She had stayed for the evidence. And now she had it. The records Ave collected exposed the payroll skimming and fraudulent fees being taken from employees. Her evidence also showed that security cameras had been tampered with while workers were being mistreated. What had looked like isolated complaints was now impossible to dismiss. Vanessa Reed was confronted with the evidence as well. The woman who had helped humiliate Ave now learned exactly who the janitor was and what Ave had uncovered. There was nowhere left to hide. Damian, Vanessa, and the others involved were fired. And because the misconduct went beyond workplace abuse into illegal financial schemes, they faced legal consequences. But Avenue wasn't finished. The investigation had exposed failures inside her father's company that couldn't be solved simply by removing a few employees. Richard began reforming the company. Systems that had allowed workers' money to disappear were addressed. Employee protections were strengthened. And the people who had spent years feeling ignored were finally being heard. Among them was Miss Evelyn. She had welcomed Ave when she believed Ave was simply another cleaner. She had shown her kindness without knowing her surname, her wealth, or who her father was. Ave made sure the elderly cleaner received the support and recognition she deserved. Then Richard turned his attention to his daughter. After everything Ave had accomplished, she could have stepped directly into a powerful position. She refused. Instead, Ave applied for an entry-level HR position. She wanted to earn her place on her own merits. Her time as a janitor had shown her exactly what happened when the people responsible for protecting employees forgot about the workers beneath them. Ave wanted to become part of changing that. She had entered her father's company wearing a janitor's uniform because she wanted to understand ordinary employees. She left that experience having exposed the people who exploited them. Damian Weston had spent weeks believing the janitor had no power. He was wrong. Ave Carter never needed her father's name to bring him down. She only needed the truth.